Welcome to the Generation Lyme podcast. My name is Jesse Ruben. I am a board member, and I am here with my fellow board members, Brooke, Haley, and Jennifer. We took a couple months off, but we are back, and we are here to talk once again about communication. I am excited to see how this goes. Haley, Brooke, and Jennifer, how are you doing today?
Great.
Good.
Fantastic.
It's Friday early evening. You know, we're dragging a little bit, but we're here, and we're having a great time. For those of you just joining us for the first time, Generation Lyme is an organization designed for anyone who is impacted by Lyme disease, whether that is patients, supporters, family members, relatives. We host meetups, we have our podcast, we have our Instagram account, we have a ton of amazing resources on our website, which is genlyme.org, GenLyme. Please go check it out. Thank you for listening. Please rate and review us 5 stars, and we will love you even more than we already do. All right, everybody, let's get into it. This is my favorite part of every podcast, where we start talking about the topic and no one wants to say anything, and we all stare at each other for like 4 seconds in silence. So the topic is communication. We have a couple things that we want to cover today, but Brooke, I'm going to pass it to you first because you were pretty adamant about this in as far as communicating what the experience of Lyme disease is like. What do you think is missing in that, in the world of communicating the Lyme experience? What do you think people are doing a good job with? How has it impacted you? Let's talk about it.
Great question, Jesse. Yeah, when I think of the topic of communication, I think about the opportunity and also the challenge that I have every single time I try to explain my Lyme experience to another person. And there are almost 2 ways that this can go. So in my case, I've had Lyme disease and also babesiosis for about 13 years now. And if I'm explaining symptoms or just the general health journey or my treatment plan to a person who has a tick-borne infection, that person often gets it because the story has familiar elements to mine. But if I'm explaining my experience with Lyme to someone who doesn't know someone with Lyme disease, then I think a very funny thing tends to happen. One, I typically have about 30 to 60 seconds of airtime before the person I'm talking to asks a question. And so when I said sort of challenge and opportunity earlier, what I meant was I've had so many experiences where I try to explain my symptoms or treatment to someone, and then that person just like interjects a question. So as a specific example, I might want to list 20 of my symptoms that I've experienced in the past.
Only 20, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So I start to go down the list.
That's what it's like to have Lyme disease.
Yeah, you have
Exactly.
to choose your top 20 symptoms.
So I'll say something like, yeah, look, I contracted Lyme disease a long time ago, and it created a lot of symptoms like brain fog and food sensitivities and chemical sensitivities. And, I started to say fatigue, like the next thing, but the person jumps in and says, oh, what do you mean by chemical sensitivities? And it's such an interesting experience because I'm usually not done talking, but I also understand that a lot of the symptoms of Lyme or other tick-borne infections are hard to explain and hard for people to understand. And so I don't blame the person for asking a clarification question, but at the same time, I really just want to get through my elevator pitch of explaining my story, because that feels good to me. I feel like I'm being an educator or a helper in that situation.
Are the symptoms hard to explain, or is it just the amount people find it hard to believe that there are so many individually? I don't think the symptoms are hard to explain. The part that's difficult is people wrapping their heads around how one thing that they've maybe never heard of could cause a bajillion different wrong things.
I think it's all of the above.
Yeah.
I think brain fog is a great example. In 2012, when I tried to explain brain fog to people, before it was part of our vernacular in a sort of COVID and post-COVID world, people just didn't know what brain fog was. And I had a hard time explaining that it could mean elements of confusion or like hard to figure out like what word I wanted to use at the end of a sentence, or I might just forget the name of the person I was talking to temporarily. And that was brain fog for me way back when, but it was very hard to explain that to someone before there was a broader understanding of what brain fog really can be.
Also, I just want to mention briefly, you said you have babesiosis, which according to People magazine is the hot new disease of the summer.
You know, love to be a trendsetter.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're really ahead of the curve. How does it feel to have the hot, sexy new illness, Brooke?
We all had babesiosis before it was cool.
Way before it was cool. Jeez, I love that stuff.
It's not new.
But I also just, not that we need to talk about that for a long time, but also like, you could have asked anyone who's been sick for a long time that has that, and they would have told you it's not new. Who decided to use that word? Who approved it? It's whatever. Anyway, I
think we do need to talk about that. I mean, that's a part of what that's an important piece of communication, right?
Yes.
Like, it's amazing on the one hand that that's coming out and being discussed at all. On one level, that's a huge victory and something that we're glad to see. And on the other hand, we're like,
Are you serious?
First of all, yeah. First of all, people have been having this and talking about it for a long time. And secondly, repeating, people have had this for a very long time.
Right.
There's no science that says recently discovered. The science says it's just rapidly expanding, which is a huge difference, meaning not new, just a huge problem. So it's just all like packed into the area of communication that is important to our community.
Do you find, Brooke, the way that you've talked about Lyme, has the responses changed in the last couple years? I mean, I know you mentioned that like brain fog, people are much more familiar with it because of COVID, but I'm just wondering, in your experience, like I know 10 years ago, almost nobody in my life outside of the Lyme community knew anything about Lyme. And I find when I talk about it now, which is happening more and more because more and more people I know are getting sick or know someone who's getting sick or going on vacation and finding a tick and freaking out and calling me panicking. Are you finding that there's been a substantial shift in communicating about your illness? I don't know what this hand motion is, but I'm going to stop doing it. Do you find that that has shifted in the last couple of years?
I think for me, the most notable and ironically the most rewarding shift that I've noticed is in the response that I get from the person that I'm talking to. It's much more common these days for me to hear a response of the person might know someone who has a long-term form of Lyme disease and has really struggled for years and just not gotten better quickly. And that is a common part of the response that I'm hearing these days. So maybe I'm talking to someone who does not have Lyme or another tick-borne infection, but will say something like, oh, yeah, you know, Brooke, my neighbor has had Lyme for 20 years, or my aunt really struggled with Lyme for 7 or 8 years and she did get better, but she really had a hard time with it. And so I recognize when you're sharing your story, the familiar elements to my aunt's or neighbor's story too.
Yeah, Jennifer, Haley, have you noticed a shift in recent, because I know we talk all the time, but we pretty much only talk about Lyme disease. So outside of our conversations, how often are you talking about Lyme in your normal lives? How does everyone in your life know exactly where you are in your health journey? Have you noticed when you talk to people about it that it has changed?
That's a large question.
I know. Well, I was just, because I was thinking about it while
it is a large question.
Because I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, they talk about Lyme all the time, but it is 100% possible that you literally only talk about it when we're all on the phone together.
No, I talk about it all the time. I'm guessing Jennifer too. Yeah, I agree with Brooke fully. It's definitely more of a topic now than like when I first got diagnosed. People would be like, oh my God, we have Lyme in the US. I'm like, oh my God, you know. And now it's more like at least once a week I get a call or a text, or my family will get a call or a text saying, oh my God, we've pulled a tick off of our kid or my partner or whatever. What do we do, kind of thing. I'm also hearing about people getting more antibiotics when they first get bit. So that's been really cool to hear.
Just for the people at home, because I am actually painfully undereducated about this, what should somebody do if they find a tick on themselves or someone that they care about deeply?
Well, none of us are doctors.
Also that, I probably should have led with that.
Just want to point that out. But as it's known in the community, carefully remove the tick. You can find tick removal instructions online. And save the tick, send it in for testing. There's many resources to do that as well. You could always reach out to us. And you're supposed to take antibiotics for 4 to 6 weeks. There's dosing and everything like that. But again, we're not doctors here, so I don't want to put out a treatment principle.
Just don't sue us.
Don't sue us.
General guidelines.
If I was bit by a tick today, please God, don't let that happen. One, I would be in a mental institution immediately. But two, I would take 4 to 6 weeks of doxycycline and send the tick in for testing for peace of mind and pray to everything that I believe in that I would be okay. But yes, to go back to the question, a lot of people know my journey and things. And I just moved back home. So a lot of people that I haven't seen in many years, I am seeing for the first time, which is very lovely. But usually the first question they ask is, how's the Lyme stuff? Are you good now? And it's a lovely question because I know they care. And to kind of backtrack even to Brooke's first comment about communicating illness with the people around you, I almost find it trickier to navigate now that I am feeling better and I'm kind of on the cusp of remission, maybe in remission, which sounds counterintuitive, I know, and it sounds like, well, you're feeling better, so everything's great. But you know, I always, or not always, right now I've been replying with like, yeah, I'm actually feeling pretty good. I'm just, you know, inch by inch, but for the most part, I'm doing great. And everyone replies usually with something along the lines of like, oh, great, it's gone. You're good now. And I always...
Doesn't that kind of sound like, oh, yay, we don't have to deal with this now in regards to
Yes
you?
and no. Yes and no. I think in the past, I would have gone there. But the people in my life now, I know that's not true. And again, I've done a lot of therapy and a lot of work to get myself to the place I'm at now mentally with this. And I'm not saying this every day. Some days I'm like, screw you, you know. But now I receive it more of like oh, thank goodness you don't have to go through that ever again, you know. But I do always try and kind of backtrack and correct them and say something along the lines of like, well, it's not over. I'm just feeling really good right now, and I'm very grateful for that. And I have to work really hard to keep it that way. You know, I can't like do whatever I want with my life now. I still have a handful of supplements I take every day. But I'm not giving myself shots every day, stuff like that, you know? So I try and kind of bring it back to reality so that there's not this false information being spread. I feel like that's a responsibility that I have being part of this community. But again, like how Brooke was saying about the elevator speech, people tend to cut you off because I'll say like, well, no, you know, it's not over. I'm just feeling really good right now. And then I'll start saying some things and they'll be like, oh, great. Okay, well, I'm so glad you're feeling good. You know, it's like, And I still think it's like people can't comprehend that this can happen to humans, whether it's denial because of fear or who knows. I feel like someone who is perfectly healthy, or, you know, quote unquote perfectly healthy in this day and age, can't comprehend that a human could possibly have an illness like that behaves like this, you know. But also we're just undereducated as a
So
species.
I love that you brought that up because that's something that I really struggle with, and I would love to know if this happens to you guys. But I have people in my life that I am like extremely close with who watched everything that I went through, who have made zero changes in their lives when it comes to like protecting themselves, going to high endemic areas, letting their kids play in uncut grass and lawns and rural places. And it freaks me out and it's very frustrating and I get really scared and I'm like, did I go through nothing? Did I go through this for nothing? Like, do you guys have that same thing? Do you have people in your lives that are like that? Jennifer, you're making a face.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I
Yeah.
could just I get that people can't understand something if it's not happening to them, but like we talked all the time. Like people who came and sat with me while I was getting treatments, came with me to the doc. I don't know. I haven't thought about that, but then you brought it up, Haley.
Yeah, I think I know a ton of people like this, and I'm also an outdoorswoman, whatever. So I'm in a community where people are in the woods in these environments all the time. And I am dressed head to toe in like 3 layers of permethrin infused clothing and immediately shower as soon as I get home, and other people are in like jeans and sneakers kind of thing. And they look at me like I'm an idiot, which I do look like an idiot to normal people, but I'm not having a panic attack, so I'm happy. But yeah, it's interesting because a couple years ago, a friend of ours who is also an outdoorsman got bit and had some symptoms. He knows all about my story, all about what I went through, was never freaked out. He has kids that run around barefoot kind of thing. They're all hunters, fishermen, everything. And he had a few symptoms that kind of put him on his butt for like a week and totally freaked him out. And now he's covered head to toe in permethrin clothing and all this stuff.
So not from seeing what happened to you.
Right.
It had to be that's got to be
I
a
think
design flaw of human beings, man.
totally. This whole like we're invincible thing. I really think it's like a subconscious fear of like this can't happen to me because it's too awful, you know. But who knows? There's also just silly people out there. Jennifer, I really want you to talk. Your face is going nuts down
I
there.
know.
Well, I was really, there've been so many questions so far that I
Sorry,
would
we're
love
all
to,
over the place today.
that I would love to address. And I was most recently debating whether or not I wanted to tell a particular story. Because just, I guess, working back, this can be incredibly frustrating to have gone through this Lyme and co-infections, this general tick-borne disease hellhole, and done it in a very public way as to try to raise awareness and change people's lives in a positive way and change people's behavior. And also to educate people in your life, as Jesse and Haley, you were both saying, as we were all saying, to just hopefully prevent what's happened to us from happening to other people. And then additionally, like for all of us, and I definitely for myself, I like changed my career to be like dedicating myself to becoming as much of an expert in this and sort of public health issues as I could, and in my way, right? So Yes, there were some friends who would either exhibit symptoms and say, "Oh, I had a tick bite, but it can't be me," or "I don't have that." I did get diagnosed for it, but I did test positive, but I don't have that. And it's like, because there's something inherently weak about me that means I have Lyme, or there's something inherently gullible
Like they
about
don't want
me.
to admit that they have
Yeah,
that
they
weakness
just
or something.
decided that Lyme wasn't for them, despite their
Listen,
diagnosis. And
I wish I could have made that
yeah,
decision.
but this isn't even it. But so there must be some things either inherently weak about me that Lyme got me and didn't get them, despite the fact that their lives are not perfect and their health is certainly not perfect. There's something inherently gullible about me. The fact that I believe that Lyme exists for me, but that they must know based on their outdated and limited knowledge, and in the contrast to my current and far more advanced and in-depth knowledge. But what really takes the cake, despite having some friends, very close friends, go through this alongside me, or other close friends say, "Oh, I'd love for my young child to experience being on the grass," and then put them on the grass without any protection. And I go, "What are you doing?" And they go, "Well," and I go, "Hello," and they go, "Why?" And they go, "Weren't we just talking about what I'm up to with Lyme?" Oh yeah, that's not even it. There's a certain story. I won't go into details because it's inappropriate, but there's a very close family friend whose health totally tanked within the last year, and in a very dangerous way, and who at some point in this reported having had a tick in his head, and he went through the whole ringer of diagnostics that we all did, like rheumatological, neurological, all the things all the most devastating diagnoses that really acute neuro-Lyme mimic, but aren't. I had like the exact same story that I had, that so many of us have had. And because our families are so close, everyone said, "You should talk to Jennifer. You had a tick bite? You had a tick bite? Oh my gosh." And despite I know more about this, we know more about this subject than most people walking the planet. I mean, think about the majority of how many people are walking the planet. I had the best advice to give, the best contacts in terms of doctors and resources. And I got a flat out no, that can't be what I have. All right. And I don't want to. And it was sometimes yes, but it can't be that, because he just wanted to go with what he's older. And back in the day, he had gotten some information that said that Lyme could never be serious. I find that younger people tend to be a little more up to date with new information, changing minds, and being more flexible. And that's not across the board true. It's just older people are like that too. But there are some older people in the medical profession who are a little harder to change the minds of. So that was incredibly frustrating for me, because I was sort of tasked with saving this person and was getting the door shut in my face. And at some point I had to say, "Well, I'm here if and when you want. I can't make you do this."
But on some level, like, isn't that fascinating? Like, that person would rather be right than healthy.
No, I think he was just really sick at some
Yeah.
point.
Well,
And
that's a good point.
and it became incredibly hard for me to hear about. And I would always try. And yeah, so I don't even want to speak about his choice or his personality or anything going on. It's just like a story of something that can happen, and it's frustrating. And they might have tried, but it's also like, once you get really sick and you have to find a new doctor or relearn, or like the seriousness of a topic that you once learned was nothing, which and you're already kind of down, you're already very symptomatic. It's just very hard. It's too much to tackle, and that's just extraordinarily challenging. So from my perspective, as someone who had gone through that and actually gotten quite a bit better after trying everything only through Lyme treatment, I was like, oh my God, I am like the perfect testament to how real this is. Because without Lyme treatment, without the things that treat exactly Lyme, I would not be functional.
I have to agree with you, Jennifer. I've had instances where people are like desperate for help and you just lay out the silver platter and they just kind of brush everything off and say like, well, I don't think, you really know what you're talking about. I'm like, first of all, I have training. Second of all, I've been through this. Like if someone laid out that silver platter for me 20 years ago, I wouldn't have almost died multiple times. And it wouldn't have taken me 10 years to be able to stand up again. You know what I mean? So I think it feels like a diss personally, at least to me, when people don't do that, because it is kind of like, what did I go through this for if you're not going to let me help you? But also like, how can you not believe me? But yeah, even the people who get bit, right, acutely and text you, what do I do? What do I do? And then I have like a pre-written essay that I copy and paste because I get these inquiries, if you will, all the time. So I just
From other outdoorsmen.
from everyone, outdoorsmen,
was so good.
normal people. Thanks, Jesse. That was a good
Normal people.
Well, we all
Setting
know I'm
Mars?
not
I
one
am
of those.
thrilled to be considered a normal person in this context.
But yeah, we'll get texts and calls about, hey, I got bit by a tick. What do I do? And I will send this beautifully written essay with information backed by multiple sites, multiple doctors, multiple whatever. And they'll be like, oh, okay. The doctor just sent me 12 hours of doxy. So I think we're just going to do that and see what happens. And I'm like, great, thanks. I'll talk to you in 10 years when your kid is bedridden. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so maddening. But as I'm saying this, I just had a light bulb moment because I almost said it's so maddening when people don't listen to you. And that is like the basis of all that Lyme patients go through. People don't freaking listen to us.
Yeah, I mean, we just did for Lyme Awareness Month last month. We did like what's one thing you want people to know, or what was the wording of it, Jennifer?
If you could tell people one thing about Lyme, what would it be?
And wasn't being believed like the number one thing by a
Yes.
mile? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, by like 10 miles.
So
Believe
if you're
us, listen
listening to
us.
this,
Believe me.
if
Believe
you're
us.
listening to this, we believe you, and you are not a crazy person, and it is a real thing, and you are not crazy.
Yeah. And I do
Not
want
even
to,
a little bit.
no, not even a little bit. Even if it makes you feel crazy when you're going through
Oh, it'll
dealing
definitely
with
do
people who
that.
don't. But I do want to like come back to what Brooke said at the beginning about how it's different now, talking to people, how the response is different, because I agree that I find too that for every person who doesn't believe still, or even every doctor, for every frustrating experience, there are now new ones and many more new ones of people who are listening, who are believing, who sadly have become familiar with it one way or another. That's because there aren't broad solutions yet, but also because I think the work that people are doing is working. It's been working, and that's meaningful. And it doesn't like take away all of these experiences of people getting not believed. It has not made everybody's experiences better at all yet. But I do think that there are changes happening and that there are just more open minds and willing ears. And that's something that matters.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this long enough that even just like when we started Generation Lyme to now, like there are so many things that are different as far as like treatments that are available, funding, awareness, celebrities coming out. Like, there's listicles about like the 8 celebrities that have publicly talked about Lyme disease, and that stuff just didn't exist 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So yeah, we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think personally, I wish we were moving a little faster in the right direction, but
Of course, we all want to. We would always want it to be faster. If we didn't have a cure and an elimination of all symptoms like right now, we'd always just want it to be faster. And also for every story, I bet each of you has a story of somebody who did listen to your advice, like better than the ones that we've just mentioned. Because I
100%.
do.
yeah,
Yeah,
dozens
yeah,
for sure.
100%. And
Just to
my
get some
God,
balance to the.
it makes it makes the suffering. I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure I can speak for all of us. That one person who you see get better because of the advice, it makes all of the shit that we went through that much more worth it. Like it for me, it helps mentally because it gives me a purpose of like, why is this happening to me? Yeah, like saving a life is pretty cool.
Yeah, we've probably all saved quite a few, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think everyone in the Lyme community probably.
Well,
I shouldn't laugh at that. That's not funny.
I was just about to say one of the themes that's pretty obvious from all of us speaking, from Jesse and Jennifer and Haley in this podcast, is that one ramification of our experiences with tick-borne illness is that we are highly motivated to communicate information and resources about this set of conditions to other people. And I'd love for the 4 of us to talk about that, not just as sort of what we might do one-on-one, whereas I might explain my Lyme disease experience to someone else in my life or a stranger. But I think as we have chosen to be part of Generation Lyme, we have a real opportunity and again, a challenge of how do we communicate information about Lyme and other tick-borne illnesses to a large audience, and how do we do it in the most effective for change way, in a way that creates great advocates and interested advocates who can help us get change made faster.
I was laughing because when you were saying that, I was like, sometimes I don't want to advocate and talk about it in a way that will do the most good. I want to talk about it and do what's going to make me feel the best, which isn't always the same thing. And in my head, usually revolves around yelling at politicians. But yeah, no, I think it's an interesting, challenge for sure.
I think I'm gonna call on Jennifer to start with this one. For those who are listening, Jennifer does just a brilliant job thinking about the way that our Instagram account and website communicates with a large audience, and that I don't want to put words in Jennifer's mouth, but I think Jennifer thinks a lot about what terminology is the most effective and appropriate, what resources are the best in an enormous world of potential resources that we could provide as a short list to people who just want to learn more. And so I'm passing the mic to Jennifer.
I like it.
I'm sure she has.
I was sitting here just waiting.
Sorry
for
to
her
put you on the
unmute.
spot, but I think you have some really great insight there.
That's super nice. Thank you. I was just thinking like I was just talking a lot, so I'm gonna pause. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I do think about it a lot. Yeah, to the question of how do we make the best advocates, I think generally empowering people with knowledge and with confidence to speak whatever they have to, whatever story they have to say, whatever's on their mind is a huge part of it. And that's super basic, but that's one thing. So one thing that we do is we encourage people to share their experiences by sharing their stories. And we love for them to share their stories on our account. They don't have to, but that's a big part of sort of general advocacy, just putting it out there, raising awareness. That's why I think a lot of people start to know what it's like to have Lyme disease and also connect with other people. So it heals patients and it also helps the broader public understand things. And to your point, Jesse, it doesn't have to be in a certain tone or a certain type of way to be effective. In some cases, it can have a multi-purpose or a dual purpose, and that matters too. When we do things like a Lyme disease awareness campaign or awareness month set of things, we think about how to share with the rest of the world more than we share with our specific community what it's like to have Lyme disease and also facts about Lyme disease. So I often think about what has been discussed in this podcast a couple of times, which is what is the elevator pitch for Lyme, and not the disease or the set of tick-borne diseases, and what it's like to have Lyme, because that elevator pitch hasn't quite existed and or it's not quite accessible. It could use some refinement, and people could use some, like people who would want to say it could use some help like getting to it, and just because we all have brain fog and there's so much that people deal with when they have Lyme. There are little intricacies about tick-borne disease itself. And so just helping people pick out the big ticket important things to share that are really going to get across the most important aspects of tick-borne disease and what it's like to have tick-borne disease is, I think, part of our job to help people get the point across, to either change the experiences that they have in their lives, just make their daily lives more comfortable so they have greater understanding from the people they deal with or their doctors, and make greater change, say, as advocates dealing with like the medical and legal policymaking establishment. So that looks like very short single point posts that we've made that go into a little more detail, where we talk about how, for example, Lyme disease is a public health crisis. And we talk about how, when you scroll a bit, how there are at least 476,000 new cases of Lyme disease diagnosed each year. That doesn't account for long-term or illnesses or the fact that testing is woefully inaccurate. We talk about how Lyme disease, that ticks can, how Lyme disease is not just a short-term illness. We talk about how there are a lot of different symptoms of Lyme disease, how it can mimic multiple other conditions, and so on. There are a lot of different things about that. We also share quotes from people's stories just to give a holistic picture and help people put together what would be their elevator pitch. And then on the rest of our website, we try to make accessible solutions for people who are looking for help in a variety of areas. So that's our way of contributing to advocacy. We're always building it, we're always adding, and we're always also trying to make it simpler, both for our community, who we know we're all looking for something simple and digestible. And we also want to share things that are like that too.
And I think one of the reasons we've been able to be successful at some of those things is because we provide a lot of validation for people who just so desperately need that. I think one of the biggest reasons people are afraid to share their stories is because they're worried about repercussions. And when you validate someone's experience, it gives them permission to share that with others. And I think that is so necessary in what we're doing. And yeah, if you like our Instagram account, that's all Jennifer. She's basically the brainchild of that, and she does an amazing job of it. And she hates when we compliment her on the podcast, which is why it's so fun to do. So for our last, that's very sweet.
There's one thing I didn't say.
Yes,
there's one thing I didn't say. We also are committed to sharing resources that we know are science backed as well. So while we don't necessarily cover everything, like all types of research, like other Lyme orgs that you might find, when we do share information about Lyme disease or any other medical or scientific stuff, even if it's not medical advice, we make sure that it's backed up by research from like renowned institutions that can be traced back to facts, because we know that there's a lot of misinformation and even disinformation out there, and we absolutely do not want to contribute to that.
Totally. Anything else? Are you good? Yeah. So for our last topic, one of the things that you guys mentioned wanting to cover was how to communicate with your support system. Obviously, if you're fortunate enough to have one, navigating that while you're getting diagnosed, while you're really in the throes of your illness, on the other side of your illness, all of that comes with its own challenges. And I was just wondering from you guys, were there things that you found were really helpful when communicating with your support system? Were there specific challenges that came from trying to talk to people closest to you when you were really, really sick? Was it the same with everybody? I just want to touch on that, because I know that for some people listening are like I don't know what to say to my partner, husband, wife, parent, child, sibling. You know, there's like all these different categories of people that we have to help us navigate these things. And I'm just wondering if there were things that you guys do. I think, Haley, you mentioned you have like buzzwords or code words.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say, if you don't have a close support group, or even if you do have a support system, we are 4 people who created Generation Lyme because we didn't have a community. And it's very refreshing to get on a meetup and not have to communicate in a certain way. Like I find in my, I don't want to say real life, but my non-Lyme
know what you mean. Yeah.
life. Yeah. For lack of a better word. You know, I have to, not as much anymore that I'm in a better place, physically and mentally, but I used to have to totally put on a mask and like behave differently than I wanted to. So I just want to remind people that we have meetups for parents, supporters, Lyme patients, partners, all sorts of things. And they're
What
all
a
on
great
the website.
what a great segue.
A little pitch.
What a great plug. Unbelievable.
Yeah, so a little trick that I learned again from therapy. Great stuff, by the way. Highly recommend.
Very pro therapy here at Generation
Very
Lyme.
pro therapy. And if you don't have anything to therapeutize, that's when you go. And that is totally a word. Anywho, so my main caretaker physically was my mom. And I am lucky enough to have incredibly supportive parents once I got diagnosed.
Must be nice, Haley.
Listen,
must be nice.
They would adopt all 3 of you in a heartbeat.
I'm out of here.
You're not allowed to live in their house, but
you love your parents. Yeah.
You could totally be their honorary children. They love you guys. So anywho, my mom and I used to butt heads like crazy. Because we just had a totally different communication style. She's a very anxious person. Since I've gotten sick, really sick, I have turned into an anxious person. But I didn't know how to work with it. So she would come in hot, as we like to say, with her anxiety, and I would just flip out and have Lyme rage episodes, and then I would just feel terrible because she's an incredible human, and I just like yelled at her at the top of my lungs for an hour, whatever the Lyme rage episodes consisted of. So my therapist told us to try this thing where you use a code word when you're starting to get worked up, and you can say that code word to the other person, and it's a mutual code word. So when you say it, the other person knows not to take it personally, but you just need to step back for a second and cool down and regain your thought. So like you could say pineapples or oranges or whatever you want to say, gummy bear, all of mine are food related, apparently. But you can say whatever you want. Pick a code word that you don't usually say. And when someone you're talking to is starting to trigger some response in you, you could say gummy bear, and then they would know, okay, we need to stop this conversation. It's nothing personal. I'm not a bad person, whatever. Let's just change the subject and we can come back to it later or not. And so every time my mom would say things that started triggering my anxiety or my PTSD or all, a number of things, I would say our code word, and it helped us communicate so much because it didn't turn into this crazy blow up where I was screaming and then my dad would come scream because I was screaming at my poor mother. And, it's brought a lot of peace to our family. And it's such a simple thing. Like, it's just a code word. And as long as everyone's on the same page about it, it's such a simple thing. And it's so helpful to just say, because when you're getting triggered, at least for me, I freeze up. Like, I can't say like, hey, excuse me, I'm getting triggered right now, so can we pause? Right? I just freeze. So I can say orange, in the middle of a conversation that has nothing to do with oranges, and then done. So I wanted to share that little tidbit because it helped me and my parents a lot.
I love that. Brooke, Jennifer, do you guys have anything to add about communicating specifically with like the people closest to you?
Yeah, well, first, I would just want to say, Haley, I learned so much from that. I did not know of that strategy, and I was just listening to every word. Thank you for that. I was also trying really hard while you were talking to figure out what I was going to say, so the time helped. But I realized that one strategy that I thought was helpful when I was, interacting with supporters like friends or family was to do my best to explain why something was happening. Part of the reason is that I'm the type of person who needs to understand why a lot. That gives me confidence in certain things or an understanding of, again, why certain things are happening. But let's take an example. Maybe I'm with my friend and we're supposed to go do something fun, but I committed to it, but now I'm just too tired. And so in this case with my friend, I might say, I'm overwhelmingly exhausted. And the reason is because fatigue is a really difficult experience or symptom that I experience with Lyme and babesiosis. And it's particularly bad today because I'm herxing. And that's because I take a certain type of antibiotic or herbal cocktail, and I take it once a week, and I took it yesterday. And so my herx is particularly bad today. I am just so tired. I can't do this fun thing, even though I said I would do it a while ago. And I feel like just doing my best to explain the why something was happening, whether it was a symptom or treatment or whatever, would usually create a level of understanding that helped us avoid conflict.
Two things from that. One, can you just briefly explain what a herx is in case somebody's listening and doesn't know what that is? And two, did you ever worry about backlash get backlash from the people in your life? I mean, one thing that comes up a lot, especially with people that are newly diagnosed, is like not wanting to bail on people, wanting to make sure that they keep their friends, that people don't get mad at them for not being able to do things. Like, did you ever have that? Did the people in your life sort of understand right away? Do you just have really great friends and that's not an issue for you?
I think like most people, I instinctually don't want to disappoint my friends and family. And that can create some difficult pressures, maybe the pressure of I'm herxing, I don't feel good, but I also don't want to disappoint this person. So I'm just going to power through it. And then there are also negative ramifications from that: overextension, like more exhaustion, like worsening of symptoms. And so there's so many topics here. about, creating boundaries and not overexerting.
See our previous podcast, all to learn all about boundaries.
But of course, I always feared backlash, Jesse, and I always, had to do this intricate mental calculus to figure out how much I needed to protect my own health versus was I willing to, overextend myself, possibly to my detriment, to not lose face in front of this person who's an important part of my life. So I hope in me saying that feels like universally familiar to anyone listening, because I've certainly struggled with it, and just on a daily basis, I do my best to kind of make the right choices.
And can you tell us what a herx is?
Yeah, a herx is a process which occurs when one is using a treatment like a medication effectively, and the medication or herbal supplement is killing a Lyme disease bacterial strand or bacteria of another tick-borne infection, and as a result of the bacteria kind of dying within the human body, the body takes time to recover from that. Sometimes I think that the bacterial strain dying just kind of creates a temporary wave of bad nefarious material that's kind of running around the body, and it just takes a while for the body to handle that or to excrete it in various ways. And so to me, that's the herx. It's a temporary feeling that symptoms of the illness are actually getting worse, which is so confusing, because if you are literally making yourself better by using treatment effectively and in a science-backed way, you would think that you would feel better, but a herx is a temporary period of feeling worse before you start to feel better. How did I do with that? That's my best way of explaining a herx.
One of the fun nuances.
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Lyme disease. You did great.
That was good. Another term for that is a die-off reaction. So it's just when something is dying off, it feels crummy and you feel worse, like something's dying.
Excellent use of crummy.
That was great. Yeah, thanks for the assist there.
And then you get this really twisted mindset that if you do any treatment and it doesn't make you feel like total crap, that it's not working.
It's true. It's really just a mental minefield to
Yes, it is.
try and get better.
We've got a couple minutes left. Jennifer, do you have anything about communicating with your support system that really sticks out as far as what really worked or what really didn't work, or what you sort of had to do to navigate that? Because you were also like living at home during the pandemic a little bit when you were having symptoms, which to me would be challenging on multiple levels. And
It was challenging. I had already been through some I would say I'm on the spectrum of having had a very hard time communicating with my pre-existing support system before it got better. So for my stories are not, they're peaks and valleys. Yeah. So I agree with Brooke completely about a lot that you mentioned that's helpful. Like the why is good. But mine, in addition, is like I had people in my life who kind of treated, and there are a few who I keep at an arm's length still, but they're very old friends, or who kind of treat it like I need to tell them things. And I came to learn that I don't need to tell everybody everything, and I don't need to give a why or an explanation. But,
like that they felt that they were owed a justification for why you weren't
or just like details. And there are relationships that are like that, and there are people whose personalities are just more like that, and that can be challenging when you are trying to navigate your own situation. And when once you do give all of those bits of information, you don't actually get a good response. That's not always helpful, but it can be. So for me, it was good to just kind of keep an open mind and be realistic about the real situations of the realities of each relationship that I had. So within my support system, I could just figure out if I needed to tell people, I needed to let some people in, I needed to give people real information. Some of them were taking it better than others. Some of them were putting it to better use than others. For the ones that were, that was great. And I could keep them along and still kind of work on boundaries. Like, see the last podcast episode, but boundaries were really critical to communicating with my support system and building a new one. For the ones that weren't, I had to reassess and adjust how I was talking to them and what I was talking with them about. Not cut them out of my life, but maybe just tell them fewer details and interact with them in a different way with regard to like the details of my illness experience and my recovery experience, because it was just not something that was beneficial to me or to our relationship. And so that was something that just giving myself space and freedom to reevaluate, because I had to, without and trying to take the, like, it was really upsetting for a while, but then kind of giving myself space to reframe the feelings I had behind it and being as neutral as possible so that it could have like a good end, a positive solution, was also kind of useful. So it was like a mental work on my end in terms of how I felt about communicating, which ended up being very useful for me.
Can
I don't know if that
add
makes
one?
sense.
It
but-
does
Yeah, of
make total
course.
sense. Can I
Go ahead,
add
Haley,
one-
before we
one
get
minute
out of
thing?
here. Before we get out of here.
Then I'll be done. I just want to add to all of this, because I do have very supportive parents, but that wasn't the case with everyone in my family and friends and otherwise. And for many years of my illness, it stressed me out so much that people wouldn't get it or listen to me or whatever. And then there came a time a handful of years ago where I don't know if I was just too tired or what, but I just stopped caring to a degree.
Exactly.
And I was like, you know what? If you don't want to be a part of this, fine, don't. And weirdly, a few people respected me a lot more after that and actually listened to me now. Some people fell off, and I've lost a lot of friends and people in my life through this journey. But yeah, I just want to put it out there. Like, if you don't have the energy to fight and try and communicate, you don't have to. Take care of yourself, survive this hellish experience, and then that'll come later.
What did you say, Jennifer?
Yeah,
I
missed
said,
that.
yup.
Oh. Well, on that note, we should wrap it up here. So on behalf of Brooke, Jennifer, and Haley, thank you so much for listening to the Generation Lyme podcast.
And Jesse.
And also me, Jesse. Please check out our website, genlyme.org. If you have gotten to the end of this, we super appreciate it. Stick around for future episodes. If you have any questions or comments, you can get in touch with us via our website. And other than that, we'll see you again very soon. Thank you so much, guys. You are awesome. Have a great rest of your evening. Shout out to Dayquil for getting me through this episode. I'm going to get back in bed. And
feel free to sponsor us.
And I will talk to you all very soon. Thank you for listening, everyone. And we'll be back again shortly.